Well, it's that time again. It is Wednesday, therefore it must be Scott Walter, PhD. My wife calls that FUD.
Yes, that's how it's pronounced.
Yes,
That is.
exactly. So she said, in fact, I was going to give her email. That's ridiculous. But anyway, it includes the word FUD in her email because of that. So Scott, it's been a reasonably big week for
Mhm.
new things in the world of robotics. Primarily, I guess you want to talk about what happened with the new video from Tesla.
Yeah. So, what was your impression of the video that dropped? I guess early Sunday morning.
Yeah, so my first impression was, oh, okay. I
Hmm.
thought it could do something remotely like this for a very long time. But then, I dug into it a little bit, watched it a little more, kind of got a little more of the detail. Was impressed by the fact that there were at least, 8, 10, 12 other,
Hmm.
marching around. And then the email that accompanied it was talking about how the team, he was congratulating the team on providing with a lot more preachers to test with. But yeah, I would say, also the email said almost as much as the video did, I think, talking about
It
the,
added a little bit. Yeah. So,
yeah,
what you're talking about is the accompanying quote post from Milan, not Elon.
I
So,
said email, I meant
yeah.
post.
So Milan, who is basically the head of the Optimus team,
Right.
they maybe point out some of the things you would have noticed in it. So, from the most part, there wasn't really anything new in the video,
Yeah.
except that we saw a lot more bots. So
Right.
we have an idea that's there. The speed hasn't really changed. So for the most part, I was like wondering, it's like, okay, what was really the whole point behind the video, except to say that, well, we're doing some of this stuff. So they're mocking up some of the operations they're going to do in the factory, which seems to be like one of the prototype battery lines.
Right.
So they mocked that up to do the training on that. So we get to see the training data, how they do the data collection telerobotically and how that's working. Seems to be working pretty well. And they have like a lot of people who are doing that. And we noticed that there were tasks that are doing and have absolutely nothing to do with batteries or factory automation, but more folding laundry and then putting things away in shelves. So not sure what that's indicative of, if it's just trying to get more, foundation models in there to be able to do kind of everyday tasks before you put it down on the shop floor, or if
Right.
it's really because they're focusing also on the more normal everyday tasks, or just trying to verify that the hardware is what they want to lock it out before they start to do the manufacturing.
So I
Um,
so so
mhm.
so when you bring that up, I had a long conversation since we've been on this trip. My wife and
Mhm.
I have had, hours and hours to talk about things. And I asked her yesterday, I said, okay, if you had a robot, how much time would it save you in housekeeping and or, the kinds of stuff that you do around the house? Because I'm sometimes you try to figure out, is there really a use case?
Mhm.
And if you have two or three kids, I could really see it in terms of babysitting, in terms of just having a pair of eyes if you want on the kids while they're playing. I could see, all kinds of opportunities again with kids. And if you had a lot of laundry because you have kids to fold and to iron, etc. But the if without getting you know sexist or worrying about the women that are watching this just completely slamming me in the comments. The job of the housewife today is not that difficult if there's no kids. And even with kids, it's not like it was 100 years ago. So, what do you think about it? Do you think there's a big use case for the robot?
Well, I guess if you look at it, if you ask any housewife, how many hours they put in there, they will tell you it's a 24/7 job.
Right.
So don't even go there. Right.
I
A
took that.
lot of times it comes down to how picky you are on a lot of things, and
Right.
what size loads you want to have, and whether it doesn't really have to be properly folded and put away and everything else. So all of us will kind of cut the corners to what we say is acceptable. But I think the other way to look at it is that the amount of housework we do around there is what it comes up to, like our overall pain tolerance, how much we're willing to put in. But everyone will tell you there's still so many other things that you'd like to get to. You just don't have time. I just don't really have time to clean that thing out today or do this or that or something like. But if you have a bot that literally was able to do 24/7, it would get to all those things that you keep on kind of putting off and not really doing. It's like, yeah, I'll get to it someday or something like that. So it will probably keep your house really organized because it doesn't have to do anything else. It's not going to sit around and say, well, I now want to sit down and watch, you know, a Netflix movie for 2 hours. Instead,
Right.
it's going to be going around doing something in the house. So
I suppose,
um,
I suppose
I think it would be quite useful.
I think I always think of it maybe in terms of upping the quality of your life. So I've talked
Yeah.
incessantly about the masseuse aspects of this, and
Mhm.
people want to they don't want to take me at my word. They think that I'm talking about something beyond massages, but but I mean the ability of this machine to give you the perfect massage, to be able to direct it in the massage,
Mhm.
to be able to massage your feet or your back or whatever it is that maybe you're an athlete that needs massages after you've gone out and done your athletic event or whatever. I just and so then you take that idea. Now you start saying, what about the chef? I mean, I'm a microwave guy. You know, my
Mhm.
dinner's 90% out of the microwave, but now all of a sudden I could be having, amazing meals every night if I
Mhm.
had a chef
Yeah.
that. So those,
Yeah.
so maybe the luxury items would be more interesting. I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah. That'd be the other combination is that they would be able to they'll be able to do way more work because they just have the time and the patience to be able to do it. They don't have these other like duties that are going to be or obligations that sort of prevent you from getting to what you'd like to get done. So there's no doubt about it. And then if they're not able to get to that, well, then you just get a second bot and you have
There
two
you
of them
go.
running around, which is probably what people will do because we do the same thing with like computers and everything else. At some point, we max them out. We decide oh, it's time for another one.
Good one. Yeah.
So if we kind of want to get to that, I mean, the video that came out
Right.
didn't provide us a whole lot of new information. We know that there's longer duration. The bot can walk a lot longer. It's more confident that it's not falling over. It didn't, in the office space that they're going around, there's no opportunity to put any sort of lanyard or anything to prevent it from falling down.
Hmm.
So you could see they're really getting confident about the walking. And now they talked about that they're trying to make it a little bit faster. The operation they're doing was pretty simple with the batteries. And we can see that there is, at least from the prototype line situation, a location where they can fit the bot in there to actually do useful work.
Right.
And the questions come up, and it's been actually, there have been some people on the team explaining a little bit about automation, stuff like that. And everyone keeps on screaming, it's like, well, it looks so easy. Why don't they just automate the old fashioned way? And it's just because it all comes down to cost and everything else. That a lot of times to automate something is harder than you think it is, and it's more costly than you think it is. And that the fact of the matter is, at the end of that line right now, it's being unloaded manually for a reason, because they haven't got around to it, or they haven't figured out, or there's other changes that are going on. And so it's like, well, since there's a person there doing that operation, let's see if Optimus can do it as well.
Right.
And now that's a way to get this drop-in automation, and you'll be able to automate parts of your lines that you really couldn't get to before, because it just did not make economic sense. So there's
Yeah.
a checklist of a bunch of things you go through on why you automate, and
Yeah.
it's just not high in the list.
Yeah. Somebody put out a video, and I think I responded to this, or put out a comment the other day, and I responded to this, and this is something you'd be super expert at. The real opportunity, in my opinion, for these bots is going to be small businesses.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
A big business can buy, they're
The
running
big
a
stuff.
thousand or something a year. They can go buy that piece of equipment that's going to be very specific to the task. But a small business, you've got maybe, talk about a machine shop, you've got maybe 100 parts a day coming off of that machine. The bot can be over there picking up those pieces, the
Yeah.
pieces coming off
If
into the tumbler, taking them from the tumbler, putting them
right,
into the coder, whatever it happens to be.
you've got a variety of different tasks that
Yeah,
have to be done on your line,
right.
and so there could be 100 tasks.
Yeah.
Are you going to automate all 100 of those tasks? I mean, each
No.
one of them is like, oh my goodness, I got to do this. Which one of those 100?
And besides, the
And
next
then
day it's a different piece. It's another part. You're running
yeah,
with
it's
a
a different piece, and it's not running. It might be the thing you're trying to automate is only needs to be automated for a couple of minutes every hour.
right.
It's not something like, so a lot of
Right.
them sitting there doing nothing.
Exactly.
And right now, the way it's done is that you hire a guy at some hourly wage. Like, yes, go over there for 5 minutes. When you're done, then you have to do this, and they're constantly going around and doing everything. And yeah, you can automate all those things, but it's just does not make economic sense.
Right.
And the other thing is that usually the automation is doing operations that are very sensitive, and you need to get very precise control, and you need to have a lot of quality.
Right.
So you automate those things first, and the ones that have absolutely no impact on product quality, it's like you don't worry about that.
Yeah.
So again, like taking batteries off the line and sticking them into a tray is not going to affect the quality of the product
Right.
at all.
Right.
But there are other steps in there where maybe the movement or testing or something like that is very important. And then you go ahead and automate something like that. Or it's in a location that you can't have a person like grabbing in the line because like it's a dangerous situation. So you need to have a piece of automation that's doing that faithfully and
Exactly.
correctly the whole time. So that's why you'll see that little arm that's going ahead and taking the battery off the line, only to give it to a person to take the battery off the next line. You're like, well, wait a minute, why don't you just go straight to the tray right there? And says, because this is the way that they get the line set up at that point, and they're probably going to change the configuration. But the real news, I think, came out of what was prompted as a result of that video, not so much the content of the video.
Okay.
That is, we did get 2 posts from Elon talking about that. He said next year the Optimus hand will now have 22 degrees of freedom.
Yeah, that was an interesting.
And then since you're into the massages and stuff like that, that's probably something you wanted to hear. And then he followed up by saying that the actuators will mostly move from the hand out to the forearm.
Right.
And I've kind of gone into this with excruciating detail with Brian White over at his channel, and I'll probably get into it again with John, and talked a little bit about last night in the spaces with Herbert. I think it foreshadows a lot more changes coming into the Tesla bot that I think is going to mean we're going to see a generation 3 bot by the end of the year.
Wow. Yeah.
And so do you know how many degrees of freedom the current hand has?
Yes, I believe I heard you say 11.
11. So they're doubling the
Doubling.
degrees of freedom.
Yes.
And why are they doubling that, and where are they doubling it, and everything else, and asked a lot of questions. So the first thing is the current Optimus is only 11 degrees of freedom. And we have to make the distinction between a degree of freedom and an actuator. So a degree of freedom is a place where the thing can move. There's actually a joint to move. But some of those joints are actually sort of linked together, dependent upon one another. They're connected to the same actuator. So when you move that actuator, both those joints kind of move together. Right. And you cannot move them independently. So we have 11 total degrees of freedom, but only 6 actuators. So when you go to close your finger, the whole thing kind of moves down. Right. And there's a spring mechanism that allows it to go the opposite direction. And all the actuators are built into the palm, which is why the palm is like very big and very flat and rigid. It can't move because all the actuators in there kind of keeping it from doing it. They only have 2 knuckles per finger. And if you look at your own fingers, you'll see that you actually have 3.
Yes.
You have 2 on your thumb. Technically, there's another one that's buried way down here, but for all intents and purposes, if you're going to make a mechanism, you only need to have 2. And the thumb already moves in 2 directions in the Optimus bot. So they already have 2 down there. So basically the thumb is covered. They have enough degrees of freedom there. They decided, because the best part is no part and the best skew is no skew, to make all the fingers only have 2 knuckles rather than 3, and all the fingers the exact same length.
Right. And
it's only because they're mounted on kind of this arc rather than straight along here that it looks like a human hand, but you'll notice the pinky that Optimus has is much, much longer. So they're going to add a degree of freedom by adding another knuckle. So that adds another 4 to us, but we're now missing a bit more. And this is the other thing we've talked about, is that Optimus can only do this, can't do that.
Right.
All right. So you're adding a degree of freedom there down here at this knuckle. So this knuckle now has 2 degrees of freedom as opposed to like the ones that you have up there. So each finger has 4. And we have 3 here.
So now, famously,
4 times 4 is 16, plus the 3 that are here, that gets you 19. Where's the other 3 if we're talking about 22 degrees of freedom?
Let's see. Not in the wrist?
Well, see, this is the big question, is that for the 11 degree of freedom hand, the wrist was not included in the calculation.
Okay.
Sometimes when you ask people, biomechanists, how many degrees of freedom are there in the human hand? Sometimes they include the wrist in there. Okay. So they might take the degrees of freedom that are there. So that means there's 3 that are missing. And if you're going to talk about the wrist degree of freedom, normally you talk about the rotation of the wrist, not the fact that the wrist can move, because that's like the whole upper arm doing that. So ignore translation. There are some people that say 27 degrees of freedom, and they're including the translation and rotation of the wrist. So it's like, wow, what are the numbers you're coming up with?
Right.
So we're coming down with having 19. But then Elon said that they're moving some of the actuators, most of the actuators, into the
Right.
upper arm or into the forearm.
Mhm.
Now there is kind of some space there, but there's already 2 actuators down there that are used to make your wrist do this and make it do that.
I see.
So now it sounds to me that, I think the 22 degrees of freedom is starting to count the wrist. Now the wrist does have a total 3 degrees of freedom. Remember, you get a rotation this way, it's here. So you need to have all those things. That could be the missing thing. And what that means is that they're not designing a hand. They're designing a lower forearm. The hand and the lower forearm are basically considered the same unit. It's not a hand that you pop off and put on. So if you look at it right now, it looks like you could remove the Optimus hand. If you look at everyone else's humanoid bots are doing it, that means they're going into, wait, we need to integrate the hand actually into the body itself. Let's not make it a separate component. And that's the way it should be. That should be the approach, because that means they're saying, hey, the wrist and the hand are really the same thing. Let's not separate them like we have. And this is what engineers will do all the time in complex systems, is you come up with these subsystems and you subdivide things into things that you can solve more easily. And then you kind of bolt them on there.
Yeah.
But what you want to have is you want to have total integration in there. So that's where I think some of the degrees, the other possibility is that the palm is going to collapse a little bit. But since there's still some actuators in there, that might be a little bit tricky to do. So they're moving those things back. So we know we have 6 actuators right now. Some of them are going to get moved back in the forearm. But when they go back there, they have to redesign that whole forearm, because while there's some room, there's not enough room. The wrist is probably going to get a redesign. But the wrist is nice because if they're already using tendon drives, and the tendons will easily go through the wrist and get access. You won't have to have some wiring that's sticking way out, like, in a bicycle, have your brakes.
Right.
You don't always have something that are coming around, getting in the way and getting snagged on objects in your garage and everything. No, you don't want that. So it will be able to route itself through there very nicely. The packaging will be very good. But what's the additional movements you want to have? Well, we need this movement.
Right.
Okay. We're putting that degree of freedom. So we need at least one more actuator just to be able to do that. But the question is, do we want it to do this, or do we want to be able to do, that individually? So that means you're either adding 1 or you're adding 4.
You're really good at that, by the way.
Yeah. So it's either 1 or, so you're either going to go. And my suspicion is that if you're going to, just by adding 1 and moving everything else here, they've completely screwed up the training set, because the hands are part of that, photons in, joints out. Now everything is different. I mean, just the fact that they're moving it back, the tendons are going to be a different link, just the behavior, the functionality, everything's going to be different. They're probably going to be changing the actuators and the motor to make the spaces in there. So that might also change a little bit. So what that means is your training set is no longer valid for this arm. Just like with Cybertruck, remember? The problem was, suddenly FSD isn't working Cybertruck because it has rear wheel steering. It behaves a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit bigger mat. So they need to get enough to be able to get the Cybertruck up to that level. It doesn't mean that it's a complete wash of everything. It just means understanding the dynamics of it is a little bit different. So if making that radical a change down in the hand means that probably the training you're doing is wrong, why stop there? Why stop at the elbow?
So you want the whole arm to be on one? I see.
I want they're not, I don't think they're stopping at the elbow. I think they're going to also change the elbow design a little bit. There could be some minor tweaks there, but then as you go past up the elbow, you also get shoulder in there. So if they're thinking of changing this, it could be one of those things that if the analogy I want to use is like, okay, with the Cybertruck, we decided we're going to have half 12 volt and half 48 volt.
Yeah.
You would say, what? Wait a minute. It's like, why are we doing it halfway? Either the Cybertruck is 12 volts or it's 48 volts. Yeah. And I'm saying, if you're going to start changing this thing so radically down here, and those actuators they're coming up with, they are going to be compact, because if they're going to almost double the number of actuators.
All right, let me see.
Even if they're putting them up there, they're still pretty big in there. Where are they going to fit in there? Or are you going to have like an Arnold forearm? It's like, no, you still want to keep the forearm very thin, but still have that dexterity. So they must have some breakthroughs that they've got in the actuator design to make it very compact, to provide what they want, that they can start stuffing all that stuff up in there.
All right, let me try an analogy on you.
Mm-hmm.
Famously been asking for the robot hand to be able to play the piano.
Yeah.
But
It'll be able to.
it sounds to me as if they've skipped that, according to you, because you're going to get the entire arm involved here. You got the hands being able to go in all different directions. Sounds to me like they've skipped the piano. They've gone all the way to the violin.
Yeah, yeah,
Does that make
yeah.
sense?
Very, very well. It's quite possible.
I was thinking flute or oboe or something, which are very complex instruments, but they don't use the shoulders that much. But the violin, you're using, you're doing all of it at the same
You,
time.
you want to make it an integrated system.
You could
And
train this thing to play
this
as
has always been the
violin.
problem in robotics when we look at the humanoid body is we break it down into like dealing with the torso, dealing with the arm, dealing with the hand, dealing with the legs, and you need to put them together. And we're beginning to see that, they keep on talking about that as the body is moving, that the legs are kind of swaying on in there because they're learning to balance it. But you still need to take it to that next step, that you look at everything as one complete body, and not as separate parts where everything knows what it's doing. So that, yeah, means so doing the violin, oboe, anything like that, it probably would be able to. Now, whether you need to go that far, I don't know, but it may
I
very
think we
well
could
be
throw down the
that they're
gauntlet.
noticing is like, why do you need, why is this suddenly so important?
Yeah.
I don't know that it's that important for operations on the shop floor, but it may be when you start folding laundry, you realize, oh, sometimes to smooth the things out, the wrinkles out, you want to have your hands like this and not
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And this goes, the other thing is that there may be a change in the thought process because the original hand was designed to reduce the number of parts and skews.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you dropped a knuckle there. Is just like, well, that's one less part, and then all the fingers are the same length, so you drop skews.
Right.
But now they're adding in another part, which makes the thing say, okay, if they've decided they're going to do that, make the hand a human hand. And Elon said it's going to be like a more human-like hand. Right. That tells me the pinky is going to be a real pinky. It's going to be shorter and it's going to be thinner than the others. Mm. Now, whether these three remain like maybe they're identical or maybe they have a similar component or two in there, but something just to make the length a little bit different. So the hand design will start getting closer to that. Because Tesla can handle lots of skews if they want to. I mean, they know how to do that. It's just that you never want to have way more skews than you need. Yeah. So again, you go through that process of what's going to be right, and it looks like they decided to bump that up a little bit. But at the same time, they probably figured out how to do it and keep the cost down. Because I don't think they said, we're going to put this in here because we want the robot to cost $250,000 all of a sudden. It's like, you still want to keep it down, but they probably found a way of being able to do it that will have reasonably low cost.
So I think we should throw down the gauntlet. You threw down the gauntlet 6 months ago, 8 months ago, that it should be able to play the piano. I'm throwing down the gauntlet now. It should be able, when we see this Optimus get up there on stage and play the violin, maybe it should be a fiddle. I mean, after all, we wanted to.
It should have the dexterity to do it. So that's going a long way. And I really think that is like the bombshell thing there, is that they're working on a Gen 3 bot that is going to be very different. John and I were like having a big discussion about the shoulder. I think they've got, I mean, I keep on saying this, another trick up their sleeve that's going to have something to do with the shoulder as well, where I have a feeling they may be coming up with a ball and socket kind of design, which is what the human arms is, and a different way to articulate it, and which is something I would like to see. And if they're able to figure out how to make the shoulder more human-like, that means you can make the hip more human-like. And if you make the hip more human-like, that means the whole walking, all that changes. And that's what I'm just saying. It's like, it's a complete overhaul. It's just, it's going to be, and then, maybe even the head will be a little bit different. They might add, while we're at it, let's just, add that degree of freedom back in there and get full head movement. We're going to see something very different. So now what does that do for timeframes? Because remember the other posts that came out yesterday that Elon commented on? The numbers.
Oh, the numbers.
I think it was Smokeaway came up with the Optimus ramp. And he said 2024, 1,000.
Oh.
And then he used a multiplier of 10.
Right.
And if you end up producing 1,000, let's say you get that ramp that you can do 1,000 in 2024, and we're still in 2024, right? We still have 6 months. So that's still possible,
right?
That they could do that. And if you have a multiplier of 10, that means what's the number in 2030?
Did it come out to, I looked at it and I didn't pay any attention with like
lots of zeros on there. No, it comes out to be 1 billion. Okay. So that means with a ramp up like that. Now, first of all, is a factor. All right. Now, Elon's commented to us like, not quite, but, but close, So it's
Not
not
quite,
quite
but
that
close.
rapid, but close. Now, Elon talks in orders of magnitude, right? So if something is kind of close, he'll talk about it being like 1 or 2 orders of magnitude, or usually an order of magnitude. I think he would consider to be close.
Right.
So let's give the benefit of the doubt and say 2 orders of magnitude. The 2 orders of magnitude from a billion brings you down to like 10 million by 2023.
Right.
So that's
No,
feasible.
2020.
Sorry, 2030, 2030. There's a 3 in there. It just confused me. So 2030. Hey, you were saying
I
that that
know,
house was
I know,
outfitted in 2026. I'm like,
I
wait a
know,
minute,
but
that's 2 years from now, Randy.
that was in the green room, so they have no idea
Right.
what you're talking
Yeah.
about.
Okay. Oh yeah. Never talk about what was in the DMs. Oh, sorry. Or was discussed in the green room. So that means, and even if you say it's off by still another factor 10, you're still talking like $1 million at that point. And part of it is, what is the scaling per year? And a lot of the robot manufacturers are like, yeah, we could probably 10x, the first couple of years, and then maybe it goes off. So based on that, I definitely see that there is easily a pathway of that they would have 1 million bots by 2030, and maybe a little bit more. So
And I
it's
think,
very, and it
yeah,
comes down to your basis. Do you have 1,000 this
yeah,
year,
yeah.
or do you have 100 this year? So that like knocks off your 10. And if you still use those factors, you're getting up there. So
Okay, but back up a minute, Scott.
mhm,
Let's instead of putting on that kind of a hat, why don't you've done this with how many
mhm,
different companies? You've
mhm.
installed, probably
Yeah,
small
yeah,
objects
yeah,
to
yeah.
big
So
objects and
So
everything in
so
between.
let's look at so what I'm doing is as I'm trying to give us like the low, okay?
Yeah, yeah,
So the absolute low is like 1 million by 2030 is not just Elon saying it. Many
right,
other companies
right,
have said that as well. So we know that that's going to be the possibility
right,
that do not discount the fact that there will be probably 1 million by 2030.
right.
And it may be more because the production volume, at that rate will be something like that. Um, Based on the comment, you can decide how optimistic is Elon on doing those things. You're looking at maybe 10 to 100 million. So, okay, it's not gonna be a billion. And they've all talked about a billion like later in the decade,
Yeah.
is when you start doing that. But you can cut it down in that, tens of millions is quite feasible by 2030.
Okay, so
And I know your number is going to be higher. Your
well,
number
no,
is higher, but
I just want to
yeah,
look at it. I want to look at it
yeah,
slightly differently. I want to look
yep.
at it from the very beginning instead of from 2030. I
Mm-hmm.
want to talk about like if it's 1,000 this year,
Mm-hmm.
500, 700, 1,000. What difference does it make? They've probably already made 15 or 20 or 25. Who knows how
Mm-hmm.
that is? But I think getting to 1,000 this year, as you point out, but it doesn't even matter. What really matters is when they start the line, right? I mean, come on, how
Yeah.
many times have you done this? How many times have I done it?
Yep.
When they start the line,
It's going to
getting
start moving fast.
getting to 100,000 next year, if the line is operational by the end of this year, getting 100,000 out next year would be a no-brainer, and getting a
Yeah.
million the next year would be
Next
a
year.
no-brainer.
Yep.
The hard part is going from 1 million to 10 million. That becomes logistically difficult in many ways. It becomes difficult in terms of, even though we know it has an unlimited TAM, you still have to market it, so you still have to get the word out to the end user. If it was me, I'd have a trade show team that would be in every single trade show for every single industry that there is, not just the automation trade shows, which you've probably attended. I've attended lots of them. Not just the automation trade show, not just the general business trade shows, but I'd be at the bicycle show, the motorcycle show, the ship show, the recreational
I think it's called the boat
show,
show,
the
Randy.
boat show. Did I say
Just
ship
it
show?
sounds better.
The outdoor recreational sports show. I'd be at every show because that's where you got these small operators. Like I was 100 employees, I would buy 10 or rent 10 tomorrow. Okay. And so you got anybody that's got 100 or more employees looking to buy 10 right now.
Mhm.
They'll be coming down the line, and you just got to show them what it does and show them what the cost is. And I think you take orders all day long.
Mhm. Oh yeah,
But
yeah, and
still getting to
it's going to be
10
one of those
million is
that'll
big.
market itself. Once you get a certain quantity,
Yeah.
everyone's going to follow about it.
Right.
60 Minutes had a piece about it, 2 weeks
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
So 60 Minutes is starting to report on it. It means it's starting to finally percolate on up.
Right.
And as they become more capable, it's just going to be more and more. And then you'll see, when they start walking around, or people start going to McDonald's, and between TikTok, if TikTok still is around, or whatever its successor is going to be, people are just going to be posting about that all the time, and everyone's going to say, well, that's AI, that's not real. And you're like, no, it is AI, but it's real AI. It's not an AI video, it's a video of an AI.
Yeah, so and I know it's all speculation, but then we also get to this big question, and now we've heard how many people coming in on this as to how do you monetize it? Do
Mm.
you sell it? Do you rent it? Do you rent it by the item, by the widget? Do you rent it by the hour, by the day? I've been saying by the month, but for long term only in the beginning. I've been saying, $5,000 or $6,000 a month, but you don't rent it by the month. You rent it for, a year or 2 years or 3 years. Um, where are you coming out on this? How do you, if it was your company right now, and we'll agree that you and I are right, and it's going to cost between $6,000 and $10,000 to build it, but you've got an unlimited TAM and you're first to market, would you rent it by the
Mhm.
widget? Would you rent it by the hour, the day, the month, or would you just sell it for 100 grand?
I would do the robot as a service. We've talked about that. It makes more sense. Others have talked about doing that as well. Tesla, not so much. I mean, it seems that Elon is talking more about selling as opposed to leasing. I don't know why. I think it just makes more sense to do it as a service, especially early on.
Yeah,
And part of the reason is that so many things in our lives are just going to subscription as it
yeah,
is. And then eventually our transportation will be done as a subscription. We won't be buying cars anymore.
right.
You do have a lot of people lease their cars as it is already, but
Sure.
this idea that I'm just going to have a service app on there, so everything, your television viewing, the
Yeah,
software you buy in your computers, I mean, you just go on and down the list. Everything is subscription. It's really, there's very few things that we actually purchase and own outright anymore. And so it's not like there would be resistance to that idea. It's
right.
it's I almost, and I think, was it you or someone else talked about that there, depending upon, there are some companies that prefer to own their capital equipment.
That
They want to
was
buy it outright, and others that don't want to touch that. They're just, we lease stuff.
right.
And, even to the point that I worked in some automotive plants where I was shocked to see how much of this, first of all, there's other companies in there running different parts of the factory, which was like kind of a surprise. I was like, well, I would think the whole company would be
Yeah,
in there. It's like,
yeah,
well, this part over here, this logistics part over here, we've actually subcontracted it and someone
right,
else is doing it.
right.
And then they have like all these AGVs, or not the AGVs, but these tows that they drive around. So they actually have a driver that's going to be pulling all the stuff around. And I assume that they own that stuff. And the forklifts are like, nope, we don't own that stuff. We lease it also from a leasing company. And it's like, what? Wait, and it's like, you keep on going down there and you're surprised. It's like, and why are they doing it? It's because, the bean counters are sitting there and figuring out, it's like, it's actually cheaper for us to go ahead and lease this and have someone else, as opposed to owning the capital outright.
Oh yeah, and
And I would think it'd be the same way with the bot, is that depending on how the bot model is done, whether it's done like hourly, monthly, something like that, the agreement might make more sense. It's like, I've got an 8-hour operation. I only need the bots for 8 hours a day.
right.
So what's the bot going to do the other 16 hours? Do I have to worry about where the bot's going to go? But, or do I get a better deal and that someone else manages that and say, yeah, we'll how many bots do you need today? And we make sure that you get the bots that you need, and those bots are then going to go somewhere else. So if the OEMs are not leasing the bots themselves, there will be leasing companies. That's what will end up happening, is that companies will then buy the bots to do the
Exactly.
leasing, because a lot of people are going to say, don't want to buy them.
Right.
I want to view them as labor that I kind of bring in and pay hourly. And then when I don't need them, they're gone somewhere else, because not everyone's a 24/7 operation. So
Yeah.
you need someone that acts in that way, that is able to get the overview of like, what are the labor requirements in this entire geographic area, that I can meet with these bots and do that.
Yeah.
And so if the question is, the OEMs just don't want to be involved in that, they just want to sell them out, or are they going to create kind of that, I would call it like, Kelly Temp Services kind of thing, where you would make that as part of the organization that you have, or where there's going to be a huge bot economy. I mean, this is what it's going to come down to.
So,
And
so
yeah.
you're worried about, you have the bot and you're only have an 8-hour shift, at your plant, what are you going to do with it the rest of the day? Well, you take it home with you. It
Yeah,
prepares,
you could
it
take it home,
prepares your meal.
or maybe you're entrepreneurial yourself, and then you talk to the other business owners in the area and say, hey, after 5 o'clock, I'll send him down your way. Just make
But
sure he's there back in the morning, you know? So
if you take it home
it's,
with you, it makes your dinner. It makes you this
yeah,
amazing dinner. Then
yeah,
while you're eating dinner, it's playing Chopin,
yeah,
and then after dinner, it cleans the house and takes care of the
yeah.
kids.
But the worst thing is to have, stranded capital. And when you build a factory and the factory is only running, Monday through Friday,
Right.
8-hour shifts, there's like a lot of time it's sitting there idle and not, and it could be producing goods and getting some sort of value. So the same thing with the bots. I mean, but the problem with the factory is the factory is not very deployable. Some people set it up that, they have that you can build stuff in my factory. And the way I keep it 24 hours is that people are basically using it certain times of the day to be able to produce the parts they want. So that's what you'll see, like a lot of these guys that have milling machines, really expensive milling machines for their stuff, and they're only using it so many, they're figuring out how to be machining parts for other people.
Right.
And, you go out on the website and say, oh, if you need to have these things, and then these guys will go ahead and do it because they want to keep that going 24/7, because it's expensive to have it sitting there idle. And it's going to be the same thing with a bot. It's like, you'd be foolish to only be using the bot 30% of the time, or even, maybe or is it more like 25% of the time if you're just doing an 8-hour shift for 5 days?
Yeah, I've made the claim that the bot will actually provide companies who currently are afraid to go to second or third
Second
shifts
and third shift. Yeah.
because of loss on second or third shift, because of not having the supervisors that they need on second or third shift. There's a whole bunch of reasons not to do. I always had 3 shifts. That was my goal as soon as I started my manufacturing business, was to get the 3 shifts. And then in the summer, when things were really busy, we'd go to 4 shifts. And that, as you say, that's what you want in your factory. But a lot of companies, they see what happens on those second and third shifts in terms of theft, in terms of incompetence, in terms of lower production rates, in terms of quality control. And those are issues. I can
Yeah.
for 28 years, I had 3 shifts. And those are all issues, but the bot will really solve a lot of those issues.
So you don't think the bots will set up like some sort of black market amongst themselves and
Right. Yes, you never know. This is
and
the great
then
unknown part.
suddenly there's like some shrinkage going on here in
Some
the factory
serious,
output that we're not aware of.
actually, they'll be out doing second jobs
Yeah, yeah.
and smoking dope on the job. We're entering interesting times, Scott, and you as the guy, you're the master of the entire world right now in terms of
Yeah.
the robotics expertise. So
Mhm.
you're getting to live the dream in terms of thinking about how this is all going to play out.
Yeah, it is. It's going to be interesting times for sure. And don't sit on this opportunity. It's definitely going to happen. And
That is not investment advice.
yeah, yeah, but be aware. Well, the thing is, it's not investment advice because I don't think there's anything that you can actually invest in. They're not in the public markets. But the thing is to look at that and to realize there's opportunities beyond investing in one of these companies. That's the thing, is like there's going to be a bot economy around it that we're not aware of yet, or we haven't thought of.
I don't think I said it first. I think Brian Wong said it first. I think Brian Wong was the first one to say it. He said, the future, if you're worried about what your job will be in 20 years, your job will own a robotaxi. It will be to own a bot or 5 bots or 10 bots or 20 cars. The owner who's releasing or resupplying, that is going to be the big job, the big opportunity in the future.
I agree.
All right, sir. That's been great. Thank you so much, as always, for coming on. And of course, you know how much I hate talking about the future. It's so much fun. Scott, thanks for being on. And to all of you out there, as always, it's been great talking to you.